Following 18 hours of planes, trains, and automobiles, I am back in Bordeaux. While I was just here a few months ago, this time it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going back to school, specifically the Bordeaux Wine School. There's an intensive 5-day program that I'll be participating in this week, and if all goes well, by the end of the week, I will be a certified Bordeaux educator. I thought it might be interesting for you to learn more about this experience, and I intend to share some of what I learned and some of the highlights from each day along the way. Every day has a very full schedule with between 8 to 12 hours of Bordeaux-related events. These events include classroom presentations and a number of winery visits as well. Throughout this video, I'll also be discussing some of my favorite wines from some of our winery visits. Some of them offer compelling value, so you'll definitely want to stick around for that. Of course, there's always a little bit more added stress involved when there's an exam, and to become a certified Bordeaux educator, I will have to pass this exam. There's 3 components to the exam, including a blind tasting, an oral examination, and an hour-long written examination as well. The first day was extremely lecture intensive. We didn't do any winery visits this first day, but we covered about 4 hours of different presentations relating to various events that would be on the exam. In addition, we had a nice lunch with a negociant and learned all about Place Bordeaux and some of the inner workings of negociants generally. My biggest takeaway from day 1 is just how diverse Bordeaux is. It's much more than just red wine. In fact, their fastest growing category is sparkling wine. They have some excellent Crémant de Bordeaux and Crémant de Bordeaux Rosé. To end the day, we had a 2-hour city walk, and it was the perfect day for it as the weather was absolutely beautiful that day. Day 2 started out with 3 hours of lectures, but after that, it was off to wine country. We started out in Lupiac, where we visited Chateau Dauphine Rondillon, and we had a proper sit-down lunch, complete with wine pairings and a private chef. This was a fantastic lunch that was prepared by a Japanese chef. We had a number of Japanese courses that paired perfectly with the sweet wines. The Lupiac sweet wines are much like Sauternes in terms of the style, but I found them to be a little bit less sweet, and they maybe had a little bit of a bitterness at the end, but that actually helped to offset some of the sweetness. In addition, the price point for the Lupiac wines is certainly much lower than Sauternes wines as well. So if you're a fan of sweet wines, you might want to give the Lupiac wines a try. My favorites were certainly the 2005 and the 2017, both of which were showing extremely well during our visit. From Lupiac, we headed directly to the Grave AOC, where we met with a producer named Vignoble Renaud. We had a meeting with the owner, and he guided us through a winery tour, a vineyard tour, and a sit-down tasting. While all the wines here were very enjoyable, probably my favorite in terms of the quality-to-price ratio is the 2022 Chateau Lagrange. This is really an excellent wine from a tremendous vintage, and it's a very reasonably priced wine as well. This one was selling for less than $30 at the winery, which is certainly a compelling value for a wine of this quality. After 3 hours of lectures, day 3 continued with lunch at a winery in Cadillac, Côte de Bordeaux. The Côte de Bordeaux appellation is definitely a source for some high quality to price ratio wines, so if you're a bargain hunter, that's definitely a category you'll want to keep in mind. The first stop was to a winery that was called Chateau de Malherbe. They have some impressive old vines, and the visit started out with a vineyard tour. Interestingly, they also showed us where they have some bat houses near their vineyard. They installed these bat houses on trees to lure bats to the property, since they're very effective at controlling some harmful insects. After that, we had a tour of the brand new state-of-the-art winery that was certainly extremely impressive and featured a complete and complex gravity flow system. After that, we had a picnic lunch paired with some of the Malherbe wines. Following lunch, we had a tour of a nursery. While there wasn't any wine involved, we did learn how they graft vines onto rootstock. This was certainly a very interesting visit, and I learned a lot about the grafting process. Before, I always had this idea that it was maybe something that was done in the vineyard, but it turns out that it's typically done in the nursery. And so even when producers are talking about massal selection, they typically send cuttings to the nursery, and it's the nursery that will graft them onto rootstocks and then it typically takes 18 months before the nursery can deliver those vines for planting. We also found out that the success rate is not very good, and it's typically around 50% at best. So if a producer orders 1,000 vines, the nursery will probably have to make well over 2,000 just to make sure that they'll be able to fulfill the order 18 months down the road. Day 3 ended with one of my favorite experiences, which was a dinner and tasting at Chateauvieux-Tours. This is a very small estate that has only around 10 hectares of vines at this time. Interestingly, rather than sheep, they have horses that graze on the grass and help to control ground cover and also provide manure and fertilizer for the vineyard. Despite the fact that Chateauvieux-Tours is pretty small, they have some sophisticated winemaking techniques, and they use integral vinification or vinification in wood barrel for some of their most high-end wines. Their wines are all extremely reasonably priced. I really enjoyed their white wine, which was a Sauvignon Blanc, and I also enjoyed their high-end red wine. The Sauvignon Blanc sells for only around 12 euros per bottle, and even their highest-end wine was only 28 euros. So certainly very reasonable pricing for this producer. Unfortunately, they don't export to the US, and they have very limited production. But if you get a chance to track them down, or better still, if you get an opportunity to visit, I highly recommend it. Many viewers still ask me if I'm continuing to do legal work, and if so, when I possibly have time to do that. Well, this particular day was definitely our longest day. Lectures started at 8:30 in the morning, and we didn't get back to the hotel until 10:30 at night. So on this particular day, I did my legal work from 10:30 at night until 1 in the morning, before getting some sleep and starting day 4 bright and early the next day. Day 4 started out with a visit to a cooperage. Inside the warehouse, we had the opportunity to see every step in the production of a French oak barrel. We learned that these French barrels cost around 950 euros each, not including tariffs, as most of their customers are located in the United States. They're able to produce around 100 to 150 barrels per day. We also learned that they can produce about 10 barrels, sometimes a little bit more, from each tree. They use some of the scraps from the tree that aren't used for barrels for other purposes, so nothing goes to waste. The trees that they harvest are around 120 years old, and every time they harvest a tree, they replace it with a new tree. Next up was a visit to Chateau La Lagune, which is a third classified growth in the 1855 classification of Bordeaux. La Lagune is located in the Haut-Médoc AOC. Fortunately, this producer shares common ownership with one of my favorite Rhone producers, Jaboulet. This is fortuitous because we were able to taste some of the Jaboulet wines during lunch as well. Since it was raining, we didn't do a vineyard tour, but we did start out by tasting the 2015 La Lagune as well as the 2017 vintage of their second wine. The 2015 vintage was impressive and definitely offers high quality for the price, but it's maybe about 2 years or so away from its peak. After a tour of the winery and the barrel room, we went to the kitchen for a sit-down lunch with the La Lagune chef. She did an incredible job. During the week that we were in Bordeaux, asparagus and strawberries were in season, and we had some excellent dishes with each of those items pretty much every single day. The main course was a Pauillac lamb that had an incredible sauce that was probably one of the best sauces that I've had in a couple of years. The lamb paired perfectly with the 2011 La Lagune. While 2011 was not a particularly strong vintage, this wine is definitely at peak, and it was showing quite well, and it was certainly the perfect pairing for this dish. After lunch, we did a tour of the chateau and the chateau's private wine cellar, which featured a number of standout wines, including 2 bottles of 1928 Mouton. Unfortunately, after this visit, we had to go back to school, and we had lectures for a couple hours. It's certainly not easy to rally and have lectures at the end of the day after a 3-hour lunch, but we ended up making the best of it. Following the lectures, we had an interesting cocktail masterclass, where we learned about how it's possible to make cocktails with some Bordeaux wines. Examples included a rosé pamplemousse and also a cocktail that was made with a sweet wine from Cadillac that was much like a Sauterne. If you're interested in wine recommendations, wine collecting strategies, and learning more about wine, please do subscribe to my channel. I've been collecting wine for more than 15 years and also have a level 4 diploma from the WSET. So I have both formal certification as well as substantial practical knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks. On day 4, I got back to the room at about 8 p.m. As you could tell, these days were extremely busy and long, and so there wasn't really a lot of time for extra studying built into the schedule. We did cover a lot of the material, which spanned more than 500 pages or so, during our lectures, but that's certainly not enough to commit everything to memory. And so after having cocktails, I spent a couple hours doing some review and studying, and then I also got up early the next day and did another hour before heading to breakfast. Exam day started out by heading straight to Saint-Emilion, which is one of my favorite places to visit when in Bordeaux. To start the day, we visited Maison Moex, which is a negociant. Maison Moex makes some of their own wines from their own estates, but they also act as a merchant, acquiring grapes and making wine as well. They're capable of storing up to 3 million bottles in their warehouse and certainly have a very impressive operation. Following the visit to the negociant, we headed straight to Chateau Royal-Valentin, which is Saint-Emilion Grand Cru. There we had a tour of the winery and the vineyard before having a lunch. This producer makes wine from a number of different appellations on the right bank. So we tried probably 5 or 6 of their wines while we were there, first during a tasting and then later during lunch. My favorite 2 wines of the day were definitely their Pomerol and the 2019 Royal-Valentin. Both of these wines sell for around $45 to $50 per bottle, and in my opinion, they definitely are excellent buys. In fact, several members of our group purchased the Royal-Valentin on their way out. On the hour drive back from Saint-Emilion to the Bordeaux Wine School, I did a little bit of studying along the way, because now it was time for the exam. The exam was in 3 parts. First was an oral presentation that was around 10 minutes long. After that, there was a 1-hour written exam that consisted of multiple choice questions and some fill-in-the-blanks. Lastly, there was a blind tasting that consisted of 2 wines. I don't know the results yet, but I'm cautiously optimistic. I certainly do know that the oral presentation went well, and I also know that I did quite well on the blind tasting, as I was able to identify the dominant grape variety for both of the 2 wines. One of them was a 2016 Grave, and the other one was a 2020 Saint-Emilion. Following the exam, our class had a farewell dinner at a very enjoyable restaurant where we had a 4-course menu that was paired with some local wines. Of course, we also had the inevitable asparagus and strawberry courses as well. After that, a smaller portion of our class went out to a wine bar and had a number of impressive wines to blow off a little bit of steam before heading out the next day. Pass or fail, I'll definitely be updating everyone as to my results, which I should have in the next 7 to 10 days or so. Once I get them, I'll do a community post on YouTube. If you're a fan of Bordeaux like I am, you'll definitely want to check out my playlist that's linked above, as I've published dozens of videos about numerous different topics in Bordeaux.